The following is a paid program.
About alligators in a lagoon. And we know what they mean. I planted rice in the lagoon with my grandparents and my parents, and many of you did. But you see, the waters that wash down from the hills of Laventille, across the land from Mayaro, from the east, all the rivers that join together, they bring the greatest civilizations on the earth here together in Trinidad and Tobago. And when you speak of alligators in a lagoon, I call on Dr. Rowley to condemn or to say whether he agrees with the statement made by, I think, his candidate, Hines. This man is talking about alligators in a lagoon. And you know, I want to know what is Dr. Rowley's comment, and someone must ask him that. Does he agree with that statement? You see, in this country, I said already, the greatest civilizations are found here, merged and joined together. The Ganges meet in the Nile. Right here in Trinidad and Tobago. 1/3 of our population, 1/3, that is 1 in every 3, 1/3 of the population of this land is of mixed ethnic origin. So when you talk about alligators in a lagoon, are you saying to all those of mixed descent that they must deny their ancestry? That they must deny half of them or 1/3 of them? This country is no longer a land of one race. It is a land of many races blended together in harmony. I can see you. I can see you where I stand tonight. And I can see the Ganges and the Nile flowing in your blood, because I can see all the Douglas. I can see all the Cocopayo. I can see all of you mixed together, which is what makes Trinidad and Tobago the great nation that we are. So do not disrespect, do not dishonor any race, any creed, or any religion in our land. You see, he never condemned the Calcutta ship in Tobago when the comment was made, and I call upon him today. Dr. Rowley, tell us, what is your comment about alligators in the lagoon? And if you cannot answer that, you will lose 1/3 of the population of Trinidad and Tobago. And another third, and you will lose all of the population of our land.
If you still undecided, that come like if you're in a ring with gloves and a big strong heavyweight coming at you, and you making up your mind whether to put up a guard. Something is happening. We have seen the government, but I was under no illusion. I watching them since 1995, and in May 2010, when I saw Kamla Prasad Bisesa as Prime Minister, when I saw she chose Anand Ramlogan as Attorney General, when I saw Suraj Rambachan, when I saw Devant Maraj, And when I saw Arnold Roberts, I knew trouble was on the horizon. I wasn't expecting nothing else. That is a recipe for mayhem and confusion and trouble for Trinidad and Tobago. I knew it was impending disaster. That is the leadership she provides. That is why she can't tell none of them nothing. And all of them is alligator from the same murky lagoon.
7 minutes after the hour of 6 o'clock. Let me say a pleasant good evening to all and sundry. Good evening to all citizens of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to the election platform with yours truly, the Gladiator. Citizens of the Republic, it was last Friday as I peruse the daily newspapers, looking through the headlines, reading the stories, and going through the commentary from the newspaper's columnists. What interested me, the Gladiator, was the commentary written by Dr. Sheila Rampersad last Friday in the Daily Express on page 13. And I read over the article about 3 times, and I must say it was cleverly written. I must also say, if there was any area that can be deemed libelous or defamatory, I as a layman was unable to discover such. And it is based on my little knowledge on the law of defamation. And today's Gladiator's editorial would be based on the headline of that commentary written by Sheila Rampersad. Though she might not be responsible for the headline, the editor-in-chief might be the person responsible for the headline. But I choose to use that headline in my editorial today. And the headline of my editorial today, entitled, "Have You Had Sex with Her?" The candidate was Gary Hart, husband and father. The year was 1987. The allegations that he was a womanizer who, right at that moment, had a young blonde woman in his room. The same woman photographed sitting on his lap aboard a yacht named Monkey Business at Miami's Tomberry's Isles Resort. Frequented by beautiful women, rich, powerful men, many of them involved in drug business. Tom Fielder, Miami Herald, in brackets. One journalist asks, who this woman in the house? And have you had sex with her? Question. The question marked a moment in America's political journalism that changed both politics and journalism. And it is in the vortex of that moment created 28 years ago on a Washington alley with a presidential candidate back literally against a brick wall. In the almost 3 decades since Hart withdrew from the presidential campaign, there has been much academic reflection and newsroom soul searching about media's entry into private lives of politicians. It is generally accepted now that personal background, close examination of politicians' past, and how those pasts might affect their present and future are acceptable areas of media scrutiny. Full stop. Under the Sexual Offense Act, a minor is a person under the age of 18 years. The Act sets out specific offense which deals with any form of sexual abuse which may have been committed against a minor by an adult. A man who has sexual intercourse with a girl under the age of 14 years commits an offense, and if found guilty, is liable to a sentence of life imprisonment. It is not relevant whether the young girl consented to the intercourse or if the man was unaware that the girl was under 14 years of age. A man who has sexual intercourse with a young girl between the age of 14 and 16 years may be liable to imprisonment for 12 years. Under this category, the man may not be found guilty if, subparagraph 1, he honestly believed the girl to be 16 years of age, or he is not more than 3 years older than the girl, and the court forms the view that he was not wholly to blame. It is an offense for a woman to have sexual intercourse with a young male under the age of 16 years. It is also generally understood that the character issue is not going to disappear from the media and public radar, and that when people run for public office, they implicitly approve entry into areas of their private lives that could only reasonably remain private while they were private citizens. The guiding principle for journalists is no longer whether private lives of politicians should be scrutinized by the media, but that the areas being scrutinized germane, relevant to the subject. In other words, I turn to a very important area, and I want to quote for the listening public a statement made by the opposition leader, Dr. Keith Rowley, on the 26th of April, 2013. When you are in public life, you are not immune to allegations. In fact, you attract allegations. You cannot help that. It is part for the cause. It is part of the vineyard in which we labor. Full stop. However, How we respond to these allegations is what is going to determine who we are, what we are, and whether, in fact, the allegations have been properly dealt with. Full stop. Even if the allegations are frivolous, once you hold office, you are duty bound to respond, and to respond effectively and truthfully. Full stop. Our people are not unreasonable. Our people, in fact, like to defend the underdog. And if allegations are made against you, they give you the opportunity to clear your name, not only in the court of law, but in the court of public opinion, sometimes to a fault. Full stop. I've also read the article yesterday, Monday, in the Daily Express, The Private Lives of Public People by Michael Harris. So, citizens of the public, in this editorial, I will not beat around the bush, but in this editorial, it relates to a public figure, a person who is in public life, and that person is no other person but the opposition leader and political leader, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. It's on the PNM website, where to this day there have been no alteration or amendments to the contents of an article published on the PNM's or the People's National Movement website. And permit me to read the first paragraph, citizens of the Republic. Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley was born on October the 24th, 1949 in Mason Hall, Tobago, and was raised by his grandparents, who were prominent Tobago farmers. Dr. Rowley is married to attorney-at-law Sharon Rowley. They have two daughters, Tonya, who's an attorney-at-law, and Sonel, a postgraduate student, both of whom won national scholarships. And I wish to say congratulations to the two daughters of Dr. Keith Rowley. Go further in a quote. And you know, today I'm going to open up the lines very early because I have a question coming up here. And let me quote Dr. Rowley again. When you are in public life, you are not immune to allegations. In fact, you attract allegations, according to Dr. Rowley. You cannot help that. It is part for the cause. It is part of the vineyard in which we labor. However, how we respond to this allegation is what going to determine who we are, what we are, and whether in fact the allegations have been properly dealt with. There have been numerous allegations of the political leaders past. Numerous allegations. It was an allegation that he has a son by the name of Gat Allen. To this day, he has not taken any legal action against anyone and sued them for libel or defamation for accusing him of having a son by the name of Gat Allen. But the issue is not Dr. Rowley having a son by the name of Gat Allen. The pertinent aspect of the allegation is how Gat Allen came into existence. But not that. We go further, and I go in line with the statement by Dr. Sheila Rampasad. When people run for public office, they implicitly approve entry into areas of their private lives that can only remain private while they were private citizens. Dr. Keith Rowley is not a private citizen, and I want the listening public to understand that. He may go throughout the length and breadth of this country. At the end of the day, Dr. Keith Rowley is not a private citizen. If he steps down from being a candidate for Diego Martin West and he say goodbye to public life, he then becomes a private citizen. The question, as how Sheila Rampasad said, have you had sex with her? And this is the label of my editorial today. Have you had sex with her? And the person I'm referring to is Rosalind Allen. The question is, have you had sex with Rosalind Allen? This is what you have to answer, Dr. Keith Rowley. And it is a very pertinent question, because it's an allegation. And if the answer is yes, the question again, the follow-up question is, at what age did you have sex with Rosalind Allen? If there was a relationship between Dr. Keith Rowley and Rosalind Allen, for us to continue in our scrutiny of this public office holder who holds the position of opposition leader of the lower house of parliament, and who has an aspiration to become the next prime minister of this country, then the question is, how many times you had sex with Rosalind Allen? And I want to remind people, Dr. Keith Rowley is no longer a private citizen. He is in public life. And let me just give people the numbers here, because I'm going to pose this question here. And the numbers for you to start calling in, 222-8255, because, you know, I can go on at length with my editorial or ad infinitum. On Friday the 26th, 2013, this is what Dr. Rowley said in the lower house of Parliament, and let me quote it. If a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable. And that's what coming. He might think so, but we cannot be encouraged to accept that yesterday was yesterday and today's concerns are out of place, full stop. Let me just read it over again. This is what Dr. Rowley have to say in the lower house of Parliament. And I'm quoting here black and white. If a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable. He might think so, but we cannot be encouraged to accept that yesterday was yesterday and today's concerns are out of place, full stop. And that's where my question to the listening public is at. Do you agree, to the listening public, and the lines are open, do you agree to Dr. Rowley's statement that if a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable, full stop? Do you believe and do you accept Dr. Rowley's statement? Do you accept it? The lines are open. 222-8255. These are the questions to the listening public today. Good evening, caller. What questions to the listening public today? Good evening, caller.
What age you fell out off your pants?
Next caller. Good evening, caller.
Good afternoon, Gladiator.
Good evening to you.
Have you ever had sex with a man?
Next caller. Let me repeat the question again, listening public. The question is, if a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable. Do you agree with Dr. Rowley's statement? Good evening, caller.
Yes, good evening, Gladiator. I agree with Dr. Rowley, and therefore he should recuse himself from the politics of Trinidad and Tobago.
Good evening, caller. The views of the last caller is not the views of Gladiator, neither the views of this radio station. I only asking a question. Do you agree with Rowley's statement? If a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable. Full stop. Do you agree with Rowley's statement? Good evening, caller.
Good evening, Gladiator.
Good evening to you.
I quite agree with you. And not only that, not only 2 years ago, you know, once that man is a pedophile, 10 years from now, he's not right to be there. And I'm so glad you brought up this topic, because the question was asked, did you have sex with her? But you see, I also want to know if Dr. Rowley had sex with the lady, and how long, what was the lady's age? Because I remember the lady saying she had always admired Dr. Rowley and he was keeping it quiet. So what age was that when the thing started between these two people? And this is the question I want to ask. Thank you, Gladiator.
Thank you. And I'm sticking to that question. Rowley made a statement in Parliament, citizens of the Republic, and I have it here, black and white. If a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable. Good evening, caller. Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Gladys.
Good evening to you.
How was the honeymoon?
Next caller. Good evening, caller.
Hello?
Good evening.
Hello?
Good
Hello?
evening. Next caller. Good evening, caller.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
Yes, I agree with him.
Thank you. And let me, before we take the other calls, and let me tell for those of you listening, 222-8255, because people, this is just the beginning. Let me repeat the question again. Dr. Rowley, on Friday, April the 26th, 2013, made a profound statement in the lower house of Parliament. Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley stated, if a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable. Full stop. Good evening, caller. Do you accept that statement from Rowley?
Norman, is that?
Next caller. Do you accept that statement from Rowley?
Good afternoon, Gladiator.
Good afternoon. Good evening.
Good evening. Just allow me 1 second here. And I hear what you're saying, and I understand what you're saying, and yes, what you said is true. But one question I'm going to find.
No. Thank you, caller. You see, no one is going to call and just change the course of my program. You understand? Because I just want to prove a point to the listening public to show the level of fanaticism and sycophants conduct and behavior. In that, here it is, their own leader, my political leader of the PNM party, have made a profound statement in the lower house of Parliament. And if I am misquoting Rowley, I am prepared to go to court and be sued for libel and defamation. Dr. Keith Rowley made a statement in the laws of Parliament because people, I have not yet divulged information as yet. This is just the beginning. More to come. And that's why I'm posing the question to all of you out there, because whether you all don't want to deal with that question, the reality is that Dr. Keith Rowley made that pronouncement in the lower house of Parliament. And let me read it over, and I'm going to read it until we reach to the end of this hour. Because the time has come to deal with the issues and the scrutiny of a man who is holding public office. I told you, I am taking the headline from Dr. Sheila Rampasad of the Daily Express, where an article was published, have you had sex with her? And I'm using that headline as my editorial today. I'm also taking, because I've read the article of Michael Harris, and this is what I'm saying, we are posing questions. And the questions we are posing, based on the on Gladiator's editorial, have you had sex with her? Have you had sex with Rosalind Allen? At what age? How many times you had sex with Rosalind Allen? And that is why, stemming from that premise, the question here is, do you agree with Rowley's statement? If a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable. Today, we are in the general election campaign. And the question is, do you agree with Dr. Rowley's statement that he made on April 26, 2013? Good evening, caller. Good evening. Next caller. When you take too long, you get the click.
Good afternoon.
Good evening, caller.
Good afternoon. Yes, I believe he had sex with her.
No. Next, no. That is not the question. Let me ask you, do you agree with the statement of Dr. Rowley? Dr. Rowley made a statement in the Lower House of Parliament. If a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable. Good evening, caller. Do you agree with that statement?
I agree. Gladiator, I agree with this statement.
Thank you. Next caller.
I agree.
Good evening, caller.
Thank you. Next caller.
Good evening. Next caller. You gotta get accustomed to the phone. Let me again repeat because I'm repeating the question. Caller. You gotta get accustomed to the phone. Let me again repeat because I'm repeating the question because I want you to listen public because I know it has some foolish people outside there just run them out, bump their gum, and say things what Gladiator did not say. When I come to discuss issues, I come with black and white. And if you all are watching me live on the Power 102 internet live stream, you will see the documents I have here. And this statement was made in Parliament. Rowley cannot deny that he never made that statement. Good evening. Do you agree with Rowley's statement that if a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago? Do you agree with Rowley's statement that if a... Yes, good evening, caller. 2 years ago. I cut that person off.
Good afternoon, Gladiator. Yes.
Good evening.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm asking all and sundry because this question is going to remain here until we get all your answers. The man who was on the platform last night in Laventille, the man who was at Pigot's Corner, the man who is the prospective candidate for Diego Martin West, that man, Dr. Keith Rowley, made a profound statement in the Lower House of Parliament. Dr. Sheila Rampasad, she wouldn't quote that statement. Alan Harris, a columnist of the Daily Express on a Monday morning, he won't quote that statement. Gladiator is going to quote it. And for those of you now tuning in, let me quote it again. The man who's aspiring to be the next Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, made this pronouncement in the Lower House of Parliament. If a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable. I want to know how many people outside there would join in union and in harmony and agree with Rowley with that statement. Good evening, caller. Good evening.
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
I agree with this statement.
Thank you. Next caller. Good evening.
Gladiator.
Next caller.
I hear you saying that.
Next caller. You see what
Gladiator.
Next caller.
I hear you saying that.
Next caller. You see what happening? I'm proving my point. I am proving my point.
Hear that said. Hello.
Good evening, caller.
Hello.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes.
Hello.
Next caller. You see, the leader of the PNM party made a statement, but all of a sudden, PNM activists or PNM supporters who want to see Rowley become the next Prime Minister don't want to agree with Rowley's statement. And that statement must hurt all you. That statement must live in our psyche because it's not Gladiator making that statement. It is the man himself, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley making that statement. And let me repeat that statement again. If y'all will have nightmare tonight, don't blame me. I am only quoting what Rowley said. This is the man who goes on a platform throughout the length and breadth of the East-West corridor. Today, he must live by the statement. And I'm only asking you people out there, do you agree with the statement made by Dr. Kate Rowley? And the statement is, if a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable, full stop. How many of you agree with it? Let's take some more calls and clear up those lines. Good evening, caller. Good evening. Good evening, caller.
Good afternoon. Are you gay?
Next caller, you see? Prove my point. Good evening, caller. Good evening. Next caller. Good evening, caller.
Good evening. Yes, I agree with him.
Thank you. You see, they cannot accuse Gladiator of making up that statement. If I am wrong in that statement, I'm only repeating what the Hansard said. And let me repeat it again, because a lot of people who now looking on saying they didn't hear it at all. Rowley made a statement in Parliament in the year 2013. If a man, I mean, why are they afraid to, well, so far the majority said that they agree with the statement, but I need to hear more people. Understand? It is a simple statement, but a profound statement. A very profound statement. If a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable. In other words, this is my interpretation, people. No pedophile, if I am to understand what Rowley is saying there, no pedophile must be allowed to be a teacher in a kindergarten class. And I want to support Rowley 100%. Let me take some more calls. Good evening, caller. Good evening. When they take too long, because we have a lot of people on the line.
I want to qualify my as Gladiator.
Next caller. Good evening, caller. Let me repeat the question again. Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, citizens of TNT, made a statement. And, you know, let me go back to a statement that I read. Let me go to an extended statement by Dr. Keith Rowley. If a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable. He might think so, but we cannot be encouraged to accept that yesterday was yesterday and today's concerns are out of place. He might subscribe to that, Mr. Speaker. That might be his yardstick. But we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, are not to accept that and be encouraged to accept that as our standards. So we have to say no to that. This is not Gladiator making that statement. This is what Rowley is saying. Let me read it over. Let me just read it over before I take some more calls. Because the people need to digest what Gladiator is reading. And I'm only quoting what Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley said in Parliament in 2013. If a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable, full stop. The desk was pounding in the lower house when he made that pronouncement. The desk was pounding. He might think so, but we cannot be encouraged to accept that yesterday was yesterday and today's concerns are out of place. He might subscribe to that. And Dr. Rowley is referring to the pedophile. The pedophile might subscribe to that, Mr. Speaker. But that might be his yardstick. But we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we are not to accept that and be encouraged to accept that as our standard. So we have to say no to that. How many of you agree with that statement by Rowley? Let's take the lines. Let's go to the lines. You see, citizens of the Republic, for those of you who are trying to digest, because it took me some time to do extensive research, because the file I have on both Dr. Keith Rowley and Jack Warner people, it is extensive, it is thick, it is informative, it's going to blow your mind as the days come along. Good evening, caller.
Good evening, Gladiator. Santa Cruz is agreeing with his statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I don't want people to run from it at all. The day has come for us to call on citizens of TNT, call on citizens of the Republic of TNT to ask the fundamental question: do you agree with Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley's statement?
I agree with his statements. His statements contradict his actions.
Good evening, caller. And for those of you who now tuning in, the numbers are 222-8255. Let me read it over, because I'm going to read it over. I'm going to read it over as we approach the hour. Let me read it over again, because I want people to register this in their psyche. The man who was in Laventille on a platform yesterday, the man who was at Pigot's Corner some weeks back, the man who is leader of the opposition, who goes by the name Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. This is what he had to say in the lower house of Parliament. If a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, he didn't say 5 years ago or 20 years ago or 100 years ago. He said 2 years ago. His presence in the kindergarten class is not acceptable. He means to say people, well, not the majority of people said yes, they agree. But those who doesn't agree, are they telling us that they're going to accept a pedophile in a kindergarten class? Rowley is saying, do not accept a pedophile in a kindergarten class. He went on to say, the pedophile might think so, but we cannot encourage to accept that yesterday was yesterday and today's concerns are out of place. Another profound statement. What Rowley is simply saying, not because the man was a pedophile 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years ago, we must say, well, yesterday was yesterday. This is what Rowley is saying. The mere reason that he was a pedophile 50 years, 20 years, 30 years, 10 years, 2 years ago, at the end of the day, he was a pedophile. And he must not be allowed in a kindergarten class. According to Dr. Rowley, he, referring to the pedophile, might subscribe to that. Mr. Speaker, that might be his yardstick. But we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and this is a very important part here, we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we are not to accept that and be encouraged to accept that as our standards. Let's take that call. Good evening, caller. Good evening.
Hello, good evening, Gladiator.
Good evening to you.
Good. Calling from Chunapuna. I agree and I support that statement.
Thank you. Now it is coming around and people are beginning to understand the statement. People are beginning to understand the statement. And this must be a topic on the platform, because nobody can be sued or libeled. Sued for libel and defamation. We are quoting from the horse's mouth. Gladiator is quoting from Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley's mouth. So we cannot be sued at all. Good evening, caller.
Good evening, Gladiator. I'm calling from Pity Valley, and I agree with this statement.
Thank you. And that's all I'm asking you. That's all I'm asking you, citizens of the Republic. The leader of the opposition went on to say, when you are in public life, you are not immune to allegations. In fact, you attract allegations. You cannot help that. It is par for the cause. It is part of the vineyard in which we labor. However, how we respond to these allegations is what is going to determine who we are. What we are, and whether, in fact, the allegations have been properly dealt with. Even if the allegations are frivolous, once you hold office, you are duty-bound to respond. And to respond effectively and truthfully. My question, as we come in close to the hour here, my question to you, Dr. Keith Rowley, based on allegations have been made against you, was there a person by the name of Rosalind Allen? Do you know of the name Rosalind Allen? I'm not going to act like Michael Harris or Dr. Sheila Rampersad. This is why I said, my today's editorial is, have you had sex with her? And the person I'm speaking about is Rosalind Allen. I will not bury this under the carpet. No way. And you cannot sue me because I'm only quoting you. Do you have a son by the name of Garth Allen? Let me tell you this, Rowley. I am not Vanilla Toppin. I am the Gladiator. If no politician want to raise those issues, I, the Gladiator, will raise it. Because there are thousands of people outside there who want to know the truth. And according to you, when you are in public life, you are not immune to allegations. In fact, you attract allegations because you are a public officer. You are a public figure. and your life is not private. According to Dr. Sheila Rampersad, it is generally accepted now that personal background, close examination of politicians, past and how those past might affect their present and future are acceptable areas for media scrutiny. This is what Dr. Sheila Rampersad saying, and I agree with Dr. Sheila Rampersad. Another part I agree with Dr. Sheila Rampersad is when people run for public office, they implicitly approve entry into the areas of their private lives that could only reasonably remain private while they were private citizens. That's why I cannot let you off the hook as yet. And when I say let you off the hook, you need to answer the question. I am posing this question on behalf of thousands and thousands of people outside there. They want to know. They want to know. And let me pose that question again. Page 325. That's to show the amount of pages I have here. Rowley. Quoting Rowley here. If a man was known to be a pedophile 2 years ago, his presence today in the kindergarten class is not acceptable. He might think so, but we cannot be encouraged to accept that yesterday was yesterday and today's concerns are out of place. He, referring to the pedophile, might subscribe to that, Mr. Speaker. That might be his yardstick. But we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we are not to accept that and be encouraged to accept that as our standards. 2228255, do you agree with that statement by Rowley? Good evening, caller.
Good evening, Dr. Gladiator.
Good evening to you.
One time Princess Song is agreeing with Dr. Rowley, and he should answer the question.
Thank you. And that's all. It's a simple question. It's a simple question. He cannot run from it. He has to face it. And I call on all talk show hosts. I call on callers. They must bombard the radio frequency. And they must quote that statement, because we need answers to that statement, because we are quoting Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. And that question is coupled with other questions. How old was Rosalind Allen when you first had sex with her? How old? Was she a minor? And according to the Sexual Offences Act, under the Sexual Offences Act, a minor is a person under the age of 18 years. The Act sets out specific offenses which deals with any form of sexual abuse which may have been committed against a minor by an adult. A man who has sexual intercourse with a girl under the age of 14 years commits an offense, and if found guilty, is liable to a sentence of life imprisonment. Full stop. How many of you agree with this statement here? Oh, well, people, every editorial must come to an end. So until tomorrow, this is just the beginning of the issues and the debates on Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you. I am coming for you.
That was was a paid program. Make informed decisions this election with your voice and your vote. Power 102, where the real power is.